All right, let's jump right in. Today we're unpacking a genuinely fascinating approach to language acquisition. We are looking at an explainer that breaks down exactly how an innovative English teacher uses a captivating story, a pretty magical tale called Milo on the Pocket-Sized Storm, to teach English completely naturally. We're talking zero rote memorization here. We're going to explore this strictly through the lens of a teacher's pedagogy to see how a well-crafted narrative can actually do all the heavy lifting for you when learning a language.
So put yourself in the shoes of an educator for a second. You really have to ask yourself, can a tiny storm cloud, one that fits right inside a teacup, honestly teach someone English grammar without them even noticing? Is this idea of micro-suspense the actual secret to getting students past that tricky A2 or B1 learning plateau? Well, it turns out, when a student gets hooked on a mystery, their brain kind of just stops stressing about translating every single word, and it starts trying to solve the puzzle instead. Let's crack open the teacher's playbook for this. There are basically 4 ground rules for this kind of stress-free language acquisition, where the story is always driving the bus. First up, you need a solid story hook. You want suspense right out of the gate, meaning the context carries the reader so well they literally don't even need a dictionary. Next is natural review. You just let older, familiar words repeat organically in the text, so you never have to stop the momentum for a boring review drill. Third is high-frequency focus, meaning you only explicitly introduce the most vital, common new words. And finally, the cliffhanger. You always want the learner guessing what happens next.
Okay, so how does this actually look in practice? Let's check out the beginning of the story. We start off with our main character, Milo. Now listen to this setup. Even though the room was quiet, Milo heard a tiny sneeze. Notice what's missing there, the struggle. You didn't need to look anything up to understand that scene. Milo is just trying to sleep when he hears this sneeze and finds a tiny storm cloud under his bed. From a teaching perspective, the goal here is incredibly specific. The teacher just wants the learner to catch the subject and the verb. Milo heard, Milo found. The older vocabulary just naturally washes over the student while their brain focuses entirely on this bizarre image of a tiny storm.
And then the teacher drops the hook. The little storm cloud shimmers and whispers this enchanting little line. Do not run. Ask the first question. As an educator, using a direct command like this is pure gold. It immediately pulls the learner deeper into the mystery. It basically breaks the fourth wall just enough to make the student feel like the story is actually speaking directly to them.
What's brilliant next is how the text manages emotional shifts without ever resorting to vocabulary flashcards. The narrative sets up this great contrast between Milo's old habit, fear, and hiding from strange things, versus a newfound curiosity. Because tonight, that curiosity somehow felt warmer than the fear. The learners understand this emotional contrast completely through the context of what's happening. The story itself acts as a natural review.
And just like that, the plot thickens, and we move into some really interesting territory.
Look at the stealthy grammar work happening right here. A silver line suddenly appears, leading Milo to a strange midnight bakery. But check out the text. Milo wanted to follow the sign because the line pulsed like a heartbeat, so every step felt like an answer. The teacher is seamlessly weaving want to, because, and so right into the heartbeat of the plot. The students think they're just following Milo on an adventure, but they're actually digesting complex compound sentences without batting an eye.
Now, this sequence tracks Milo's actual progression, but pedagogically, it's a masterstroke. It grounds the adventure while naturally injecting really useful everyday phrases right when the hero needs to act. Take step 2, for example, look for. By tying that phrasal verb to an urgent action in the story, the student anchors the vocabulary to a vivid visual memory. They aren't just memorizing that look for means search. They're actually experiencing Milo desperately looking for a hidden answer.
As the suspense really starts to build, we get to the emotional core of the lesson.
Milo encounters a strange rule in the room. If you tell a kind truth, the next clue will appear. And Milo's response is amazing. I am scared, but I still want to understand. This is such a vulnerable moment, and it's the emotional peak of the narrative. But for the teacher, it's a total masterclass. It shows learners exactly how to use those foundational words they've already reviewed, words like scared, but, and want, to express incredibly complex human feelings.
And because of that honest truth, boom, the floor suddenly fills with tiny stars. But catch the subtle vocabulary shift the educator is pulling off here. The transition from being scared to being honest shows the reader that courage isn't always loud and bold. Sometimes it's just quiet and truthful. The reading tip for the teacher here is to let the familiar vocabulary act as a safety net, allowing the student to focus purely on this beautiful shift in meaning.
All right, let's actually pause the story for a second and look under the hood at the mechanics of this.
The breakdown of the grammar points here really illustrates the secret sauce of this whole approach. As teachers using a story-first method, we are strictly focusing on highly useful, task-based vocabulary. Take the relative pronouns who or that. In the story, he met a bird that knew the password. The grammar isn't some abstract rule on a whiteboard. It's an essential tool needed to add vital details and drive the plot forward. Before and after dictate the actual timeline of the mystery. Have to establishes the stakes. Every single grammar point is literally a tool for survival in the narrative.
So, does it actually work? Let's put you in the learner's shoes for a quick second to find out. Let's test how well this contextual learning sticks. Look at this sentence. I blank opened the box when it sneezed. If you've been following the rhythm of the story, your brain probably instinctively yells, was about to. It completely proves that you've absorbed the timing and the tension of the narrative without even trying. You just know Milo was right on the verge of doing something when he got interrupted.
How about this one? Blank Luna was afraid, she asked a question. Again, to show that contrast in emotions, exactly like Milo's quiet courage, you naturally drop in even though. You don't need a heavy grammar textbook to explain concession clauses to you. You just instinctively know that a brave character acts even though they are scared. The context totally teaches the rule.
Okay, jumping back into the story. A tiny toothless key with a question mark on it floats down to Milo, and we hit our deliberate cliffhanger. Who put thunder inside the sugar jar? The little storm just whispers one single word, tomorrow. By leaving that question completely hanging, the teacher practically guarantees the learner is going to eagerly show up for the next lesson. Suspense really is the ultimate student retention tool.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought that brings this whole story-first methodology into your own life. The storm whispers, tomorrow. But what is your even though truth for today? Maybe it's, even though I feel shy, I can speak one English sentence today. What sentence are you going to write? Take this pedagogy, apply it to whatever you're learning, and just watch how much faster you grow when you let curiosity lead the way instead of fear. Thanks for joining me for this one, and keep learning.